This is a camping stove. This is also a camping stove. This one has two burners, but I hardly ever use both burners at the same time. So why am I carrying around a 2-burner stove? But can this little stove, that's only about 18% the size and weight of this stove, perform just as well? Let's find out. Before we begin, and I know this is kind of an apples and oranges comparison, being that one's a single burner and the other's a 2-burner stove. I get that, but if I had 2 of these, it'd still be less than 40% the weight and size of the bigger stove. So real quick, full disclosure, I bought the Camp Chef Everest 2-burner stove that you see down here about 2 years ago, and it's worked great. It's been solid. I need to clean the heck out of it, but no issues with it overall. But I've been thinking about a smaller stove for a while now, and I didn't want something like crazy astronomically priced like some of the stoves you see out on the market nowadays, and the Saturn gas stove caught my eye. So I reached out to Fire Maple and asked them if they'd be willing to let me test one out and give my genuine opinions on it, and they said yes. And I said, yeah, buddy. To compare specs, the old Camp Chef Everest here has 2 burners. Each burner is rated at 20,000 BTU per hour, and this stove uses propane. The Fire Maple Saturn gas stove is a single burner unit rated at 15,000 BTU per hour, and it uses isobutane, which, if you're not familiar, is a propane-butane mix that's popular with backpackers due to the compact and lightweight fuel canisters. A 450 gram isobutane canister like this one costs about 11 bucks. And based on my own experience, it lasts just as long as a $9, $10 1-pound propane cylinder with similar use. If you're familiar with isobutane stoves, you may have heard about them not working so well in colder temperatures. Isobutane will work down to about, let's say, 20 degrees Fahrenheit or so, which is good enough for the camping that I do, but more on that topic a little bit later. One of the self-induced issues I've had with the Camp Chef stove is that the burners are just too big for the kettle that I bring camping. The flame goes up the sides and starts cooking the plastic handle. Could I use a bigger kettle or even a pot to boil water? Sure, I guess I could, but I don't really want to bring a full-size kettle camping, and pouring boiling water from a pot just to make coffee isn't really ideal. So I've been using this tiny little canister stove here just to boil water in that kettle. The Saturn gas stove has a perfect size burner for multiple size cooking vessels. So you got these 4 supports here that can flip in for something smaller like my kettle, or even like one of those camping cups that you can put directly on a stove. Or you could flip out the supports to support something larger like this 12-inch pan. One really interesting thing about the design of this stove are the 2 preheat tubes next to the burner right here. The purpose of them is to help atomize the isobutane before the fuel gets to the burner. In lower temperatures, the fuel liquefies, causing low pressure. Low pressure means poor performance. So with these preheat tubes, you can start it like normal, wait for a consistent flame, like where there's no sputtering, and then invert the canister so that you're force feeding liquid fuel into the preheat tubes. Since those tubes are hot from the flame, the liquid fuel will then atomize and you should see dependable performance. Pretty cool design. I personally don't care how long it takes to boil water, whether it be 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but I know one of you out there is going to be real sad if I don't show how long it takes for the Saturn stove to boil water. So we're going to use my trusty old little kettle that I have and fill it up with about half a liter of water. And I'm going to use this digital meat thermometer to see the temperature of the water currently, because so many things affect boiling time, right? And we are at an elevation of only just under 900 feet, like 897 feet or something like that. And it looks like the water temperature right now is about 55.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's see how long it takes to get up to a rolling boil. All right, we got a timer ready now. Let's fire this up. So we're at a good rolling boil here, and it's only at just over 3 minutes. That's actually pretty fast. Now that we got that out of the way, what I really want to know is how well the Saturn will perform cooking a meal. So I'm going to make something that I make more often than not when cooking while camping. I'm going to sear up a ribeye and then saute some potatoes too. If you've ever tried searing a steak on a low power, weak sauce stove, you know, like those old butane ones, you know how frustrating it can be. The Saturn gas stove certainly did not disappoint and did a great job searing the steak and sauteing the potatoes. This stove also has excellent flame control. You can crank it up way high like you see here, or dial it down nice and low to get a really slow simmer. There was very little breeze that day, so here I am at home and I've got a little fan set up to simulate that. And as you can see, there's really no wind protection built into the design of the Saturn gas stove, so wind will have a pretty dramatic effect on the flame. So here's one of those folding aluminum windscreens that I've put around the Saturn gas stove now, and I've got the fan at the highest setting, and as you can see, that windscreen is really doing its job. You can see the fan like blowing around the windscreen, but it's definitely protecting the flame on the stove. So if you're picking up this stove or any stove that doesn't have any wind protection, I'd highly recommend grabbing one of these. And Fire Maple does make these windscreens as well. Here's one added benefit of having a stove top that's smaller than the diameter of your pan. All the food spatter gets on the table, and it's way easy to wipe off a table compared to cleaning a stove top. So I'm sure one of you out there is wondering if the Saturn gas stove can use propane, because I know I was wondering that. The user manual explicitly states that it's designed to only use isobutane and to not use propane canisters. I have seen videos where people have successfully run that off of one of these 1-pound propane canisters, but they only ran it for a short amount of time, and I'm not going to test that because my health insurance coverage just ain't good enough for me to do something like that. So I'm perfectly happy using isobutane canisters like this was designed to do. Fire Maple also sent me their Orca pour-over coffee kettle. I'm a pour-over coffee guy, not only when camping, but at home too. The kettle that I've been using kinda did the job, but you can't really get a nice controlled pour with it like you can with a dedicated gooseneck kettle. That's what I'm talking about. Well, this Fire Maple Orca kettle is the perfect answer for all of you pour-over coffee people out there. It'll hold 600 milliliters, so about 20 ounces of water. Good enough for those first 2 cups of coffee in the morning. So, how does the Saturn gas stove compare to what I've been using? Well, it boils water just as well, and it cooks just as well. I like that the overall diameter of my 12-inch fry pan here is larger than the actual stove itself because any spatter doesn't get on the stove. It has excellent flame control, as you saw. It'll get down to a nice simmer if you need it to. I like this super flexible braided hose that it comes with, and the whole unit just feels really solid, like a good high quality product. I am really tempted to pick up a second one of these, just for those rare occasions where I do want to use a second burner simultaneously. And using the Fire Maple Saturn gas stove means I don't have to carry my propane tanks with me all the time. Like, let's say on those short trips or warm weather trips where I know I'm not going to bring my propane fire pit, well, all I need to bring then is these really lightweight isobutane canisters instead of lugging around a giant propane tank. If you do a lot of winter camping, this probably isn't the stove for you. But outside of those temperatures, if you're looking for something a little different than your run-of-the-mill propane and butane stoves out there, then this is a serious stove in a little 2.2 pound package, and it's what I'll be using from now on all my adventures. If you liked today's video, consider hitting the subscribe and like buttons for me. It'll help me reach a wider audience. And if you want your own Fire Maple Saturn gas stove or their Orca pour-over kettle, I put links down below in the description. Those are affiliate links, so thank you so much if you decide to make a purchase using those. And even if you don't do any of those things, I just appreciate that you're watching today. As always, remember, destinations don't matter, the journey matters. This is Roger wishing you happy cooking and pour-overing. I'm a little teapot, short and stout. This is my handle, this is my spout.